Absurdity thrives best in crowds. It's the 29 May 1985, the European Cup final between the English Liverpool and the Italian team Juventus. Location: Hazel Stadium in Brussels, Belgium. As any other final, both teams' fans were to be separated by a neutral section, regarding the long history of violence between the English teams and the Italian ones. Liverpool fans saw Hazel as an opportunity for vengeance. The neutral sector swiftly filled up with mostly Italian fans, with only a rickety barrier separating them from the Liverpool section. Taunts began, followed by missile launches. Liverpool fans fastly breached the fence and advanced, as Juventus fans and others in the neutral area attempted to flee. Their path was barred by a concrete wall. Pressure became too much for the building, and it collapsed eventually, crushing the trapped Italian fans and others, resulting in 39 deaths and 600 were injured, making it one of the worst crowd disasters in history. The question raised is, who is to blame? To fully understand and analyze this, we're gonna rely on the work of the French anthropologist and psychologist Gustave Le Bon, exploring his study about the psychology of the crowds. What makes a crowd? The crowd. In its most common definition, the term crowd refers to a gathering of people of any ethnicity, occupation, or gender, under whatever circumstances have brought them together. That's the definition of a crowd. But what is the crowd? In a psychological viewpoint, it's under certain unique specific circumstances, and only under those circumstances, a group of men presents new characteristics, so different from the original ones the individuals have. The sentiments and the beliefs of all people in the gathering take one and the same direction, so that eventually their conscious personality dissolves. 1. Impulsive versus solitary. The crowd is at the mercy of all exterior exciting causes. It is nearly entirely guided by unconscious motives. The isolated individual may be subjected to the same exciting causes as the one in the crowd, but his brain shows him the inadvisability of submitting to them, so he does not. The concept can be represented by saying that the solitary individual has the ability to control his actions, emotions, and better recognize the motives behind them, whereas a mob lacks this ability. A crowd is deprived from reason and conscience, in a consequence of the feeling of irresistible power given it by its numerical strength. For the individual in a multitude, the concept of impossibility vanishes. A solitary individual understands that he cannot set fire on a building or prepare for a mass massacre on his own, and if persuaded to do so, he is more likely to reject the temptation, whereas as a member of a mob, he is aware of the power that confers on him, and it is enough to convey to him concepts of murder and pillage for him to succumb to temptation. 2. The suggestibility of crowds. A thought that has entered the brain tends to change itself into an act, as it does in all people who are under the influence of suggestion. Whether the deed entails setting fire to a building or self-sacrificing. Like in some weird cults, a mob attach themselves to it with similar ease. Everything will be determined by the nature of the exciting cause, rather than, as in the case of the isolated individual, by the relationships that exist between the acts proposed and the sum total of the reasons that may be advanced against its realization. In other words, people in a group can be particularly vulnerable to suggestion, which can result in both positive and negative effects. For example, in certain contexts such as social movements and collective action, suggestibility of crowds can be used to effect beneficial social change. In other cases such as riots or other forms of mob behavior. Crowd suggestibility can lead to destructive and damaging activities. 3. The exaggeration of sentiments. Whether the feelings of a crowd are good or bad, they present a dual trait in a way that they can be both very basic and overly exaggerated at the same time. On this point, a person in a crowd resembles primitive instincts and drives. As Gustave Le Bon stated, and I quote, "Crowds often abandon themselves to low instincts. They also set the example at times of acts of lofty morality. The crowd become unable and unaware of the distinctions, as what can be seen is the only certain specific image due to the flow of uncontrolled feelings. As said before in the beginning of the video, absurdity thrives best in crowds." And for Le Bon, such emotions and sentiments found in the crowds are extremely contagious, and sentiments such as fear, anger, and hatred eventually lead to destructive behavior. 4. The intolerance of crowds. Crowds don't have any ability to think critically. For them, their opinions, ideas, and beliefs are taken as an absolute truth. Being in doubt of these values cannot be tolerated, as can be seen in some cultures. Not being submissive to the common sense and beliefs means betrayal and heresy that may lead the person straight to death sentence, if so, as in the case of Socrates, for instance. However, the same thing is applied when the values of a crowd are being challenged by a remarkable authority, resulting in revolts and rebellions, as the history has witnessed for many years, either for an honorable cause or for a tyrannical cause. 5. The morality of crowds. In a very simplistic explanation, morality for the crowd is deactivated completely, or let's say, the morality we know is deactivated. For a person who had committed a crime, sense of guilt is deemed to occur, but for individuals in a crowd, what guilt can be considered if they don't accept and submit to the common sense, or if the motive behind it is justified through some wrong principles and beliefs. All that have been discussed is what a crowd must acquire in order to be classified as the crowd that is depraved from reason and logic.
Only in a sentence who you are.
This man, from the first sight, may appear as a worthless madman. Well, he is a madman, but also a leader of the family, a number of people whom he recruited to join his cult, and influenced them into committing brutal murders. Charles Manson set himself to be a religious figure. The key to his control was to ensure that his followers saw themselves as members of a superior elite that has all the answers to the world's problems, even if that means killing themselves and killing the rest of the world along the way. Manson convinced his followers to commit murders in order to settle what they believed in to be a race war that would propel him to the world leadership, as he preached a rambling, incomprehensible, and apocalyptic worldview that was completely captivating to his followers. By being convinced with all his beliefs, normal critical thinking and morals went out of the window. This explains why cult members commit terrible things and witness barbaric deeds and do nothing to stop or resist them. Acting against Manson is acting against yourself, and everything you have believed in him went for vain, which eventually will cause something like identity crisis. Once you set yourself to be a part of this, there is no going back, and there is no limits to what a man can do, even if it is killing someone, as in the case of certain Manson cult member. From the highest to the lowest social spheres, as soon as a man ceases to be isolated, he falls under the sway of a leader. The vast majority of men, particularly the masses, lack clear and reasoned thoughts on any issues other than their own specialization. The leader acts as a mentor for them, and what I mean by a leader, not necessarily a person, It could be a whole organization or an entire system built to control everyone. Staring at the bigger picture, we are all controlled in some way or in another. With the massive amount of information we are exposed to, it is as difficult as it has ever been to maintain our individuality and convictions. Social media, for instance, plays a significant role in this. A person anywhere in the world can start a massive virtual conflict and even contribute to the establishment of new ideas and the rise of new ideologies simply by tweeting something ridiculous. It's like a snowball that starts small and grows larger. Just set a fire on a tree and the whole forest burns. We are now, more than ever, living in the era of crowds.